Introduction. The transcript you see below is a record of a Ouija board séance I did with another person on June 16, 17 of this year, the same day that I officially published my novel, Genuflect. This story pertains to the mysteries of Mithras, the Romanized ancient Persian religion, so that is why I chose to contact that figure in particular. If you've already read my books, of course, everything that follows will make a lot more sense. We used the same board designed by my late husband, Brian Albert, under the influence of Baphomet, as described in my paranormal memoir, Clock Shavings from 2014. Now let's go over the meaning of some of the symbols on this board. As I said, this board was designed by Brian under the influence of a spirit, Baphomet, after a night of divination using a regular store-bought board to talk to the same entity. If you want to know why we were talking to Baphomet frequently on the Ouija board in those days, which was back in 2001, please read Clock Shavings. And if you need to know more about what Baphomet is, please obtain my comprehensive 618-page nonfiction book on the subject, co-written with Alexander Rivera, entitled Baphomet, The Temple Mystery Unveiled. I'm not going to explain it all right now, but I will explain what we seem to be looking at here. You may notice that You may notice that the board's design bears a striking resemblance to a Masonic tracing board in a lot of ways. These allegorical illustrations appear to depict the inside of a temple, supposedly Solomon's temple, according to Masonic ritual, containing usually a portal or stairway to another dimension between the two pillars of Jachin and Boaz, the pillars of strength and mercy, according to the symbolism of Freemasonry and the Jewish Kabbalah. The pillars are usually shown surmounted with either the sun and the moon, or a celestial and a terrestrial globe. We have the former. On the tracing boards, there is usually a second sun symbol, shown as a shining eye, letter G, or other object, bigger and brighter than the sun. On our Ouija board, this center space is instead filled with the wheel of letters in the center, surrounding a 26-pointed black star around a 13-pointed white star. You will notice that the second half of the alphabet is presented in reverse order and set opposite the wheel against the first half. This was a rearrangement of the letters that we were given repeatedly in our initial seances, with both the spirit of Cain and the spirit of Baphomet in 2001. We didn't realize until later that this actually formed a coded alphabet known as the, quote, Atbash cipher, which is associated with the Knights Templar, and which has been used by some theorists to decode Baphomet's name into Sophia, Greek for wisdom, as demonstrated in the story The Da Vinci Code. It is symbolically related to Baphomet's association with inversion and the combination of opposing forces. Here, A is Zid, as if the first is the last, and the middle is the end, like a piece of paper folded in half. Keep that metaphor in mind for future reference. Surrounding this is the zodiac, with a 13th sign, Ophiuchus, the serpent holder, added in, as I was studying the traditions of a 13-house zodiac system at that time. I discuss this subject in my Kindle book, The Cutting of the Orm, if you'd like to read more. But for now, let it suffice for us to say that the number 13 can be associated with the figure of Baphomet for a number of reasons. The fact that the sun on the upper left side is presented as black, we thought to pertain to the so-called Black Sun, which, we had read, was theorized to be at the center of what was said to be a hollow, spherical Earth. We didn't know whether or not to take this literally, but prior to designing this board, we got messages about this black sun, and we were told that it was somehow synonymous with the biblical figure of Cain, and with Saturn or Kronos. Sources I had been reading at the time, such as the early Sumeriologist L.A. Waddell, claimed that Cain's character was based on an ancient god-king with the same name mentioned in the founding mythologies of several ancient cultures. Waddell said that this figure was associated with the black, or dying sun, viewed by ancient societies as going to the underworld every night. Brian and I had originally begun to use the Ouija board earlier in 2001 to contact the dead 20th century French artist Jean Cocteau. We wanted to ask him about the symbolism of his mural depicting the crucifixion, which can be found at the Notre Dame de France at Leicester Square in London. His repeated message at the time was, "See the sun." He also added, "Yes, look, do." At the time, we assumed that he was talking about the black sun shown in the mural, the solar eclipse that occurred at the moment Jesus died. We next invoked Cain on the board, thinking we were being referred to him instead. This bore fruit, so we continued. After several amazing sessions talking to Cain, we eventually were referred to Baphomet, who became our primary contact from that point on. It was Baphomet, as I mentioned, whose spirit inspired Brian to design the board we used from that point forward. In the first several years of using it, I understood very little about what the symbolism of its design implied. Brian didn't either. So it is only in recent years, mostly after his death, that I have discovered what some of these things are really supposed to mean. The waves of water at the bottom were assumed by both me and Brian to represent the abyss of primordial chaos beneath our plane of existence. Since Brian passed in 2012, I've only worked with a couple of others on the board, and only a handful of times. One of the messages we kept getting in these sessions was that before we could really be initiated further into the esoteric mysteries of the universe that I was asking about, we had to understand the foundation. This was indicated by sliding back and forth between the two black squares seen beneath each of the pillars, which, we have been told, are, quote, foundation stones. The same messages usually involved emphasis on the chessboard that you see in the bottom right corner. Well, 5 years have passed since I first began receiving these sorts of messages, and only in the last few days have I come to understand it. In early 2015, I learned about the Flat Earth theory and the claims that the moon is a hologram. At the time, I was working as the executive producer of the national radio show Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis, so I booked both Crow 777, known for proposing that the moon is a hologram, and Mark Sargent, a Flat Earth superstar, on the show on separate occasions. Then I continued to monitor research about the subject for the next 3 years, allowing the concept to stimulate new understandings in me. Now I am thinking that by the foundation, we were meant to understand the true nature of the surface of the earth and of its underpinnings, as well as the primeval waters below. Now I realize that the top of the board, decorated with tassels adorned with the Cross of Lorraine, which has always to me seemed to imply a theater or stage, is also the roof of the universe. As for these gaps in between this header image and the tops of the pillars, several spirits have made a point of moving the planchette out through these openings, as if they were portals outside of the universe. In the past, I feared that the spirits were actually using these portals to get out of hell and into our world through our board. I no longer think that. Rather, I think that they have been trying to communicate the concept that behind the sun and moon are portals to a realm beyond, described in the Bible as the windows of heaven. These and other esoteric aspects of the heavens and earth become visible for all to see during a solar eclipse, such as the one depicted in Cocteau's mural. I saw some of these things myself during the eclipse on August 21st, 2017. Now I realize why Cocteau's main message to us from the beginning was, "See the sun, look, do." He said this to us over and over and over again. See the sun. Transcript. I want to talk to Mithras. N. Mithras, are you there? Can I speak to Mithras? Yes. Is this Mithras? Yes. Can you tell me about the keystone in the Royal Arch? Goes down to black cornerstone beneath black pillar on the bottom left of board. N.O. Can you tell me about the Uranian sun? Goes down to abyss at bottom. N.O. Why not? Uma. Where are you right now? Goes to Agio chessboard in bottom right corner of Ouija board. Are you under the ground? Yes. Do you know about the other layers of existence beyond the sky? No. Yes. Did you try to discover that information? What happened when you tried? Goes around in a circle, yes. Does the Masonic G stand for gamma? Goes to the white space right next to the moon on its left. Okay, the moon, or are you going to the star? Yes. Are you going to that star next to the moon? No. Do you mean the moon? Yes. Okay. What about the moon? H. Yes. Goes to Venus symbol, then to middle of ceiling, then to dark side of the moon. Yes. Harith. Is that the force between Venus and the moon? Goes down to the abyss, then to the sun. Which sun do you mean by that? Goes to dark side of the moon. Yes. What are you telling us about the sun and the moon? Goes down to abyss, the sun, the dark side of the moon, the rose cross, the Agio chessboard. Gofaeo, goes to the star next to the moon. Yes. Am I correct in my supposition that in each eon is there a competition for the position of the sun? Goes to sun, no. Is there a competition to be the chief light? Goes to rose cross, then to upper ceiling near the middle. Is the sun that we see in the sky a crystal? Yes. Is there a light shining through it? Goes to the ceiling, then to the opening on the right. Is the sky protecting us from the light? No. Is it keeping us from the light? Yes. Is it a prison? Yes. Is the sun a window into the outer world? No. Is it refracting light from that world? Yes. So is it like a deck prism? No. What's it like? EGGSUN. Are you telling me the sun is an egg? No. What's an egg? The moon. Is the moon pregnant with the sun? Yes. Is it going to be the new sun? Yes. What's going to happen to the old sun? Goes to the chessboard. Does that mean that he's going to go underground? Yes. What is the name of the current sun? VFO. Did the sun that we currently look at have a name in Greek mythology? Yes, Odad, Uma. Odad means hate in Gaelic. Uma means splendor in Sanskrit. Is it the same as Sol? No. NASA calls the sun in the sky Sol. Are they calling it by the wrong name? Yes. Can you give me another name I'm familiar with? Ebenhad. Eben means stone, and Had, one of the Sapphira on the Kabbalistic tree of life, means splendor, just like Uma does in Sanskrit. On the tree of life, Yesod, which means foundation and considered the sphere of the moon, is to the right and below Had, or to the southeast, if we were considering it a directional compass. Note that this is the direction in which the eclipse of August 21st moved across the United States. The angelic order of Hod is B'nai Elohim. It is associated with Mercury and with submission to obstacles. WYFVEPAVEVEEN. Ashsunas HESUMEGUEG. Are you referring to the even Shitya? Yes. Is it the sun? No. Is it the stone in the sky? Yes. Is there a corresponding stone on earth? Goes to chessboard. Yes. Is it in Jerusalem? No. Where is it? OGFI Ghent. No. Ghent? Ghent? Is that French? Yes. Is it a place in France? Yes. Actually, it's in Belgium. What about the Black Sun? No. Is it in that Temple of Mithras that the Priory of Sion talks about? Yes. No. Is it near Rennes-le-Château? Is it near Mount Cardo? Yes. What's the Ghent thing about? Ghent end, ODUEO. What will happen when the sun is replaced? Door, KOS. Are we talking about the birth of something out of the moon? Yes. What's KOS? UH, the moon. Is that her name? Yes. Does that mean vagina? No. At this point, Hareth mentions that kos means vagina in Arabic. I suggest the word was influenced by the name of the moon, and the spirit said yes. Hareth believes Arabic is the root of all human language somehow, so he always looks for the Arabic interpretation of words. I say, there are more than just human languages, and the spirit says yes. Like what? Says Hareth. Angelic languages. I say, and the spirit says yes, light. The language of light? Yes. Hareth, smiley face. What was the language of Atlantis? Yes. Yes, Hareth is Griot, RGEN ape. Yes, GEITFEGEGG. Yes. Note. K-O-S might mean Key of Solomon, as Solomon's name has been interpreted by some to mean sun and moon. So when there's a new eon, the moon gives birth to a new sun and the old sun goes underground. Is that what you're saying? Does it literally fall out of the sky? Just like sunset or like a falling star? No. What's it like for us on Earth? Sun. No. All of a sudden there's no sun? Yes. Yes. Is this connected to the eclipse that's coming up? Yes. Is Bloomberg's place going to be open on the eclipse? Yes. Is that the first day it's going to be open? Does he know what I'm doing? Yes. Am I right about what he's doing? Yes. Yes. Is he trying to fuck me up? How? No. Is he able to fuck me up? Yes. Am I going to be able to publish my book? Yes. Yes. But you're telling me that the sun's going to fall out of the sky in August of this year? So will we have any knowledge of what's happening, or is it just going to look like an eclipse? Is it going to just look like a normal eclipse? Yes. Yes. So we won't know it happened? Yes. But by the end of the eclipse, we'll have a new sun? And the moon? What happens to her after she gives birth? Goes to the moon and then up above the board ceiling. She goes up to the sky? No. No. She goes to upper heaven? Does she go up to the pleroma? No answer. What's up there? Yes, goes in quick clockwise circle around the board. You don't know what's up there, do you? No. Who does? God. Goes around the zodiac. The zodiac stars? No. The complete man? Yes. Then goes in a circle beyond the zodiac. Yes, the picture of the guy bent over backwards so that his head is touching his feet. Is that the guy you're talking about? Goes in a circle outside the zodiac. And he's on the outside of the zodiac, you're saying? Circles and says yes again. Are the stars that we see on the front of his body? Yes. Yes. So we never see his back, we only see his front, right? Yes. Is he a man? Where from? Goes to cornerstone underneath the white pillar. Is that like the cornerstone? Yes. He's from a rock? Yes. Mithras, weren't you born from a rock also? Yes. Is this your father? Goes up beyond the ceiling. The person we're talking about, the complete man, is that your father? No. Is he the same as Uranus? Yes. Which region was he born at? Goes back to cornerstone underneath white pillar. Which rock was that? Goes underneath the white pillar again. Me to N.E.W.S smiley face. He's showing you something that he can't explain what it is. He doesn't even know what's on the outside of this, much less where that guy came from. It's beyond explanation. N.E.W.S, to me smiley face, beyond us or beyond him. Me to N.E.W.S smiley face. Well, it's beyond the map. By this, I mean that it's beyond the universe depicted on the board. The planchette moves under the board for a second, comes back out, and repeats. This is when I ask the spirit to do it again, and it does. Me, to N.E.W.S smiley face, he's showing you there's other things you can't imagine. Me, to the spirit smiley face. Is that right? Yes. N.E.W.S smiley face. Was I in Atlantis? No. N.E.W.S. You know what I'm talking about? Because I was in a different dimension, wasn't I? Yes. SOS. Save our souls? Yes. From? Goes to the chessboard. Prison? Yes. Yes. Are you asking for help from us? Yes. Are we favored by God above you? Yes. Is that why you want my help? Harith. How can we help? Takes planchette out through to the right of the moon. Horeth. How to let you out? Goes around the zodiac. Hareth. Open the sky? Yes. Yes. Isn't that what Bloomberg's trying to do? What kind of magic is he using to do that? Fire. Then up through the center with the planchette. So you're telling me Michael Bloomberg is a magician? Yes. Is he one of the most powerful magicians in the world? Yes. Is he the most powerful magician? Yes. Hareth, smiley face. Who is his teacher? Goes down to the cornerstone beneath white pillar. Does it have a name? Rock of God. Hareth smiley face. Is it the same as Arabic? No answer. Is Bloomberg trying to get you guys out during the eclipse? Yes. Will me publishing my book help you do that? No. Yes. Are you therefore against it? How many basements are there in Bloomberg's building? 6. Is he a Jew? Yes. Does he worship the same God as the Jews? No. He's being taught directly by the Rock of God? Yes. No. His project, are the Rothschilds involved? Do they know what's going on? Yes. Yes. Are they trying to stop him? Does the CIA know what he's doing? No. Does MI6 know what he's doing? Yes. Yes. Does MI5 know what he's doing? Does the Queen know? No. What's he gonna do to the royal family? Son die. George? Yes. Goes up to the ceiling, to the cross of Lorraine. Sun. Yes, moon. Yes. Is he trying to trap the spirit of the sun in George? Travels around the zodiac, stopping on Taurus. The spirit of the zodiac? Yes. Traces a triangle between sun, rose cross, and moon or no repeatedly. Yes. Are you showing me a triangle? What's that about? D. Rain. Are stars going to rain down from heaven? Makes another triangle, landing on sun. We talk about it, and he starts making a larger, more specific 90-degree triangle, which Hareth notes. Are a third of the stars going to fall? Or half? Yes. Half of the stars will fall? No. Yes. Is it going to be flipped over so we see the other half of his body? No. Do the people in the southern hemisphere already get to see his other half? So for everyone on the Earth it will be a totally different star system in the sky? Yes. Will we know this on Earth? Or will we forget and think that it's always been that way? Will we recognize it when it happens? No. Do the memories of everyone on Earth change suddenly? Is that how it will happen? Yes. Yes. What they call the Mandela effect. So what shape is this stone? The one that plugs up the sky. Goes to opening behind moon in the upper right corner. You can't escape through this board. It's just a piece of paper. I don't see how that can help you. Goes to one of the crosses on the left side of the ceiling. It's an egg shape? Yes. I tell Hareth about N.E.W.S and other alleged dwarf planets, including the egg-shaped one. Hareth. Is Atlantis going to rise again? Yes. Are the spirits in Atlantis going to rise again? Yes. Do you know who's Hendrix? Yes. OQDA. Yes. So the stone is egg-shaped, so we're looking at the tip of it when we look at the sun. What overall shape is the sun? Is it spherical? Yes. Is it spherical? How about the moon? Yes. How about the Earth? Goes in a circle? No. Okay, so the Earth is a flat plane with spheres floating over it? Yes. Goes up to the ceiling of crosses? Yes. So Bloomberg is doing something that British intelligence knows about, but which American intelligence doesn't know, right? What about Mossad? Do they know? No. Is CERN involved? Goes to Rose Cross briefly, then to Moon Crescent. Is there any danger to us humans if he succeeds? Yes, no, yes. What's going to happen? Goes in between moon and opening in right side. What will happen to us humans if you get out of Tartarus? Sin kills. He's threatening us? No, he's saying that when he and the other creatures that are trapped in hell come out, the damage to us will be in the form of sin, which will kill us. Am I right? Yes. So you and your friends in prison there are the demons that we've all been warned about? Yes. Yes. So can you explain to me why your sphere, the sphere of Saturn, is the highest sphere in the sky, but you're down there in Tartarus? Is it because that's the place you used to be? So what's there now? What's that planet that they call Saturn? Is that connected to you at all? HIB. Hareth. So is Atlantis alive? No. Did Atlantis itself go to Tartarus at the end of the last age? Yes. Are you in sunken Atlantis right now? Yes. Yes. So Atlantis is hell? Yes. Is it just a part of hell? Are there other ages underneath you? Yes. Yes. Every age from the past goes down below, right? So that's what would happen if a new sun was born, right? Yes. Are we going to be saved? No. Hareth. What about the promised Arab? Yes, dead. Me. You mean the Mahdi? We get no further response. Mithras is gone. Harith admonishes me for mentioning the name of the Mahdi. Then we decide to contact Mithras/Saturn's father, Uranus, heaven, or the sky instead. Uranus, are you there? Yes. Yes. Is it pronounced N.E.W.S? Are you the father of Mithras? Yes. Where are you located? Goes to the zodiac and circles it. So you're in the zodiac or on top of it? Are you in it? Is the complete man on top of you? Yes. Yes. Is he a human? What part of you is pointed towards the earth? No response. Uranus, were you once part of the same body with your own wife? No. Are you heaven? Yes. Yes. Weren't you married to the earth? Yes. Weren't you two connected physically at one point? Wasn't there something bonding you two together? What was it? A-K-F-A cough. Did you become two separate people, whereas before you were one? Yes. What was your name before? B-E-S. Yes. Like existence? So who split you apart from your wife? The sun. Are we talking about the one known as Mithras? Yes. Was it because he was inside you and wanted to come out? Yes. So the womb of the earth, your wife, is that the same as Tartarus? Yes. Goes to one of the egg-shaped things on the ceiling containing the cross of Lorraine, then goes back to the black crescent of the moon. Is the moon itself Tartarus? So is the moon really a chamber underneath us? Yes. Me. To Hareth. This is really interesting, because a lot of the creatures I've spoken to have said that they were inside the moon. Is it the moon we see in the sky? Yes. Are we seeing just a part of it? Yes. What's the door? Where's the entrance? Passes through the moon and exits the right side. Then goes to Capricorn, which I mistakenly identify as Libra. So there's a place in the zodiac where you an escape? Yes. So what's higher in the sky, the zodiac or the moon? Goes up beyond the ceiling. You mean something beyond the zodiac? Yes. E-R-E-P-E. What's E-R-E-P-E? IFA. B-E-S-N. We only see one side of the moon ever. What's the deal with the dark side of the moon? He circles the zodiac. Are you telling me the dark side of the moon is the zodiac? Yes. Hareth. Who built the zodiacs? Goes to chessboard, then goes up to the ceiling. Demiurge? People on the outside? Yes. Goes to the white pillar, Sun, Capricorn, the right side of the chessboard, and the middle of the ceiling. Okay, so when we're looking at one side of the moon, what part of the moon are we looking at? Yes, person's oxygen monosulfide. Person's OS, operating system, or person SOS, or implying person Oz, or implying person's ass. So when we're looking at the moon, we're seeing a person? Yes, yes. Hareth. Is that Adam? It goes down below the abyss at the bottom of the board, then underneath it. Are you trying to show us underneath? What's underneath? Dad. Goes to one of the cross of Lorraine tassels in the ceiling. Dad is the one who is underneath. Yes. Who's Dad? Reek. Rake? No. Try again. Rianpo? No. Do you feel like you have a clear perspective and a clear recollection of how these things are positioned in the universe? Is your perspective skewed because you're in Tartarus now? Yes. Do you have a poor memory? Yes. Are you asleep right now? Yes. So we're talking to you in your dreams? Yes. Yes. Are you in Tartarus? Yes, yes. So you're telling me that the night sky and the zodiac is in Tartarus? Yes. Are we humans in Tartarus? No. But everything we see above us is? Yes. And everything below our feet is? Yes. Yes. So everything we think of as above us is actually below us, and everything below us is below us too, right? No. Are the things below us actually above us? Goes to ceiling and through it. Is there another dimension we're missing on? Yes. Planchette goes over whole board quickly, coming down from center top, then spiraling down and in. Yes. So everything that exists came from another dimension? Hareth's smiley face was the other dimension born too? No. So the other place has always existed? Yes. Yes. Is time something that only exists here, in our dimension? Yes. Are you outside of time yourself? Wasn't Kronos your son, the god of time? Yes. Yes. Did time start when he was born? Uranus. What would happen if the sun is not replaced by a new sun during the eclipse? Moves in a spiral, then in arches increasingly smaller and going down to the abyss through the bottom center. Is that the sky collapsing? N.O. Goes through ceiling. No. Are those layers of heaven coming down? No. Goes in a circle quickly around the zodiac. Hareth. Is the sky splitting? Yes. How so? Like splitting in half? No. Then it goes up through the ceiling. Will the universe shrink back to nothingness? Yes. Goes to hexagram, then back up to the ceiling. Back to what's outside. Yes. So Mithras is looking for an exit out of Tartarus, and in the process, our universe will be destroyed. Is that correct? So why would Michael Bloomberg want to help him with this? What's in it for Bloomberg? It goes up to the moon, and then through the ceiling. And Bloomberg gets to be in charge? Like, he gets to be God? Yes. Hareth. Will that deal be satisfied? N.O. Goes to dark side of the moon. So he goes to Tartarus inside the womb? Yes. Isn't that where he already is? Yes. Yes. So he'll end up in the same place? Does he know this? No. How could he not know this? 1. Goes to star next to moon. Mercury? Yes. Is Mercury lying to him? Yes. Yes. Is Mercury speaking to him while he's in Tartarus? Where's Mercury? 1. Level 1? Yes. Is Mercury 1 level above us? No. Yes. Is the moon 1 level above us? Is Mercury 1 level above the sun? Yes. Is Mithras still the sun? Yes. Did he get overthrown? Goes down to the rose cross around the moon, in and out of the portal next to it, and then to the sun. He went to the moon, right? Yes. So there's another sun that's ruling now, right? Goes to the abyss, then yes. I don't think I ever got a clear answer on what the current sun's name is. The one that would die on August 21st. What's that sun's name? J-T-E-S-U-S. Jesus? Yes. So Jesus is the one who overthrew Mithras? Goes out through portal and board. Yes. Yes. So now his era is coming to an end, is that correct? Is it going to come to an end anyways, regardless of what Bloomberg does? Yes. So the deal is that Bloomberg is trying to stop the birth of another sun? Yes. Is that correct? Is he trying to take over the position of the sun himself? Goes to the sun. He wants to be the black sun? Goes to the middle of the ceiling. So that's where Bloomberg wants to sit, is sort of at the top layer here between reality and non-reality. Is that the God position? N.O. Scorpio sign. O-R-E-T-U. Note that this is an anagram of outer and also outre, French for beyond. What would happen to you, Uranus, if Bloomberg was successful? Goes around the board, encompassing everything, then down to the abyss. Everything would go into chaos? Yes. And that would include you? Yes. So everything that exists now has an interest in stopping this from happening, right? Yes. I'm thinking it's a change that will happen, and the only one that will know what happened is the one who gets to sit on the outside like that. Is that correct? Goes around the zodiac twice. Yes. So other people will exist with our names and will go about our lives, but they won't be us anymore, is that right? Goes down, swiftly through the chessboard, exits out the hole behind the moon, then goes back swiftly over to the sun. Yes. New sun? New sun means new reality? Yes. Analysis. The first thing I want to address about this session is the mention of Ghent. At the time, I did not know anything about Ghent. I thought maybe it was in France. After the session, I looked it up and found that it was a city in Belgium. I found a lot more, too, pertinent to the concepts dealt with both in this seance and in my novel Genuflect. First, I came across information about how significant Belgium was in the life of John Dee, court astrologer and intelligence agent to Queen Elizabeth I. He invented the so-called Enochian ritual magic system, or rather channeled it from self-identified angels using a divination technique called scrying. Alchemy was one of his primary studies, and when I did the seance you just saw, his alchemical treatise Monas Hieroglyphica was already a subject in the story of Genuflect, as well as Dee's alleged interest in the London stone artifact. Monas Hieroglyphica is about a secret formula to recombine the elements of the universe into one thing, the monad, thus uncreating the universe, with the power then to create a new one. Specifically, these elements are represented as metals, corresponding to the 7 classical planets or heavenly lights recognized by the Old World, which included the Sun, Moon, and 5 visible planets. Dee wrote it in Antwerp, Belgium, in an inspired frenzy between January 25th and March 31st of the year 1564. Afterwards, he bragged to the Queen about having discovered some extremely powerful secret. Coincidentally, that same date of March 31st was already featured as the culmination date of the Genuflect plotline, which is about an alchemical ritual to sacrifice and regenerate the sun, as well as the other classical planets. I did not know that Dee had written a book about this very thing until my story was almost completely finished. The date on which he started the project, January 25th, just so happens to be the date on which the world's largest diamond, the Cullinan, was discovered in South Africa in 1905. It was later carved up by expert stonecutters into over 100 stones for the British royal family, whose modern members provided the basis for several of the characters in Genuflect. As it turns out, Antwerp is the center of the world's diamond trade, and the subject of diamonds had quite accidentally become central to the Genuflect story. This is because the building that I based the main location of the story on is in real life planted on a plot of land in the center of London called Bucklersbury that is shaped just like the Diamond Superman logo. This shape, I discovered, is really a 2-dimensional depiction of the side of a round, brilliant cut diamond. This particular cut of diamond was invented by mathematician Marcel Tolkowski of Belgium in 1919. Tolkowski came from a family of expert gem cutters. Being a mathematic genius, he figured out the exact dimensions to use to make a diamond that will refract white light into the brightest possible fire, the industry's term for the shimmering sparkles that shoot out the top. Recall that the spirit of Mithras told us on the Ouija board that Michael Bloomberg was going to use some kind of fire magic to open the sky. Tolkowski published the details of his invention and many variations on it in his book, Diamond Design. A round brilliant has 58 facets, including the culet at the bottom. There are 33 on the crown and 25 on the pavilion below. First off, I think this potentially relates to the gilded head discovered by the police who arrested the Templars in France on October 13, 1307. This head was labeled Caput 58M and is considered a possible Baphomet Teraph, a preserved head used for divination. But also, remember that John Dee started Monas Hieroglyphica on 1/25 and then finished on 3/31. It is almost as if the diamond cutting formula of 1 set of 25 facets and 1 set of 33 facets is encoded in these dates. To get the maximum effect, the light has to hit the top of the diamond from a certain angle. It then exits out the top from a certain angle as well. I found what looked to me to be the trajectories of these key angles encoded in the layout of the 2 buildings of Michael Bloomberg's new headquarters in London, the basis for the fictional location used in my novel. The 2 buildings at the site form a shape that is reminiscent of a keystone, and this is significant to me. The main object of power in the Genuflect story is a giant, round, brilliant cut diamond located in the main ritual chamber used in the fictional building that acts just as a deck prism does on a ship, bringing in and amplifying natural light from outside. In my story, the diamond acts as a conduit for solar, lunar, and even hyper-Uranian light from beyond the cosmos. It refracts and amplifies this light, while also filtering out harmful aspects of it. By hyper-Uranian, I mean light from beyond the visible sky, a realm traditionally attributed to the rule of Uranus. In my story, the hyper-Uranian light making certain things visible that are not seen under the normal light spectrum. I concocted this scenario based on patterns I was seeing in myths and legends that I had been coming across at the time. It was all starting to make me wonder if the sun might be a diamond. You saw before that N.E.W.S confirmed it was a, quote, crystal. Now look at the location of the windows behind the sun and the moon on my Ouija board. Could light actually be coming into our realm from behind the sun and exiting from behind the moon as light travels through a diamond? This is what I had been thinking about when I wrote the story of Genuflect, which, as I mentioned, was published on the day of the seance with N.E.W.S and Uranus. But it was only a couple of days ago that I discovered the basis of the angelic alphabet used for John Dee's Enochian magic system, which he channeled from the angels themselves, are actually formed by the angles of refraction that cause the scintillation of light through the top of a crystal. I just about lost it when I found this out. More on this in a bit. Now let's talk about other interesting connections with Ghent. Ghent might be best known for the fantastic Ghent altarpiece, also known as the Het Lam Gods in Flemish. It is located in the Cathedral of St. Bavo, or St. Bafs, the patron saint of the town. This cathedral also contains a reliquary of St. John the Baptist, his tooth, supposedly. John was a patron saint of the Knights Templar, and the Baphomet idol they were accused of performing. John was a patron saint of the Knights Templar, and the Baphomet idol they were accused of performing rituals to was described as a mummified head, thought by some to be that of John. Does the name Saint Bavo seem reminiscent of Baphomet? Yes, indeed. Saint Bavs is also the patron saint of Wilrijk in Belgium, called Goat Village, because of its association with a legendary creature called Lang Wapper. This giant thing was described as both a goat boy and a water demon, and its legend is celebrated in the village annually with an event they call the Goat Parade, which takes place on September 16th. Saint Bafs, or Bavo, was often depicted carrying a money bag. His father was Pippin of Landen, the mayor of the Palace of Austrasia under the Merovingian king Dagobert. The first Pippin of Landen's daughter was Saint Bega, whose feast days were on September 6th and December 17th. Oddly, I discovered her on Wikipedia 2 nights ago before writing this section of the essay, close to midnight on September 6, 2017. If you're familiar with my book, The Merovingian Mythos, or the magazine I used to publish called Dagobert's Revenge, you will understand the significance of St. Bavo's family connections. Now let's return to the Ghent altarpiece, which was completed by Hubert and Jan van Eyck around 1430. Is there anything that connects it with John Dee, born over a century later in 1564? Well, for one thing, it contains a hidden reference to the Notaricon abbreviation ALGA, which stands for Atech Gibor Leolam Adonai. This is Hebrew that translates to, "The Lord is mighty forever." It was used in magical talismans and rituals in the Middle Ages. Some Masonic scholars have suggested that Algae may have been the lost word of Masonic ritual. It also features on the so-called hexagram of Solomon from the grimoire called Clavicula Salomonis, the Key of Solomon. Here, the letters Algae are combined with alpha and omega symbols. This connects to John Dee because when he was divining his famous Enochian tablets from the archangel Uriel, he was instructed to put a sigil based on the Alga formula on the back of his pentagonal sigil of God, the plate that he used to support his showstone, his crystal ball. This object, also called the Sigil of Amos, was created according to the designs of his phantasmic friends. 9 inches in diameter, roundness 27 inches, or somewhat more. These are interesting dimensions to me because the Ouija board designed by Brian Albert, inspired by Baphomet, happens to be exactly 27 inches wide and 18 inches high. Returning once again to the Ghent altarpiece, we see that its main image depicts a scene inside the city of New Jerusalem at the end of days. The Lamb of God is on the altar, pouring his blood into the Grail cup from whence it goes down into the celestial plumbing system, as I describe in Genuflect, and becomes the rivers of life that all drink from in paradise. Above, there is an object casting crepuscular rays upon everyone. But we know it's not the sun, because in the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 23, it specifies that they don't have a sun in the New Jerusalem. It says, "And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof." Just like it also says in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 19, "The sun shall be no more thy light by day, neither for brightness shall the moon give light unto thee, but the Lord shall be unto thee an everlasting light, and thy God thy glory. Your sun will no longer set, nor will your moon wane, for you will have the Lord for an everlasting light." The city of New Jerusalem itself is described as coming down out of heaven from God, shining with the glory of God. Its radiance was like a most precious jewel, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. Quote, but notice this too. In Revelation chapter 4, verse 1, the one sitting on the throne of God is actually described as a stone. After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, "Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter." And immediately I was in the Spirit. And behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald. This has got to be the rock of God that was mentioned in the seance. And now that I look at the board that Brian Albert designed with inspiration from Baphomet, I see that those figures on the left and the right, a rose cross on top of a black triskaidekagon and a chessboard on top of a black nonagon, seem to represent gemstones. The chessboard could represent the earth plane, and the cross may, in this context, be seen as a, quote, crucified rock of God, a stone stuck in the ceiling of the whole structure, illuminating or even projecting everything onto us. Note that the chessboard has a crown, like a cut gem, and rays of fire are shooting out the four corners in the form of the fleur-de-lis symbol, which we also see on the upper left and right sides of the Ouija board. Are these things connected? Note also the reciprocity between the three rays coming out of each corner of the central stone on the cross and the three rays on the fleur-de-lis coming out of each corner of the chessboard. The fleur-de-lis, by the way, has a very relevant meaning, which I will explain shortly. Now note the four Templar crosses that mark out the inner square of 36 squares on the board, leaving a ring of 28 squares on the outside. They sort of look like nails fixing one square gemstone on top of another square gemstone, don't they? This was done because this is not just a regular chessboard. It's actually an Agio board, which Kane told us was the ancient game upon which chess is based. It supposedly represents a supernatural war that led to the fall of Atlantis, his words, and the flood of Noah. This resulted in him being imprisoned in a prism, again his words, and his body being used as a celestial light source for an underground realm. This is why he identifies himself with the black sun. Perhaps like a deck prism, he has no light of his own, but merely reflects and refracts it from above. If this reminds you of a certain Superman movie, that's probably no coincidence, as the word Superman and the Superman logo, the diamond, all figure explicitly into the plotline of genuflect and relate to Bucklersbury in London, the location of Bloomberg's new building, and the Rothschild family headquarters. Even the symbol and the Superman story and the diamond cutters of Belgium relate directly to the Rothschilds, as I explain in the book. The inner 36 squares on the board mark what Kane called the second square. He said this is where the real power of the game was, and indeed, in chess, competition is all about controlling the center of the board. Now look at this depiction of the crucifixion by Salvador Dali, called Corpus Hypercubus. To quote from my book Clock Shavings, "The nails, holding Christ on the cross, are positioned around his trunk, forming a box surrounding his navel, the true omphalos of the universe, and most of the vital organs, a source of the rivers of life, his blood, in the New Jerusalem and Paradise." This can be seen as analogous to the second square in a GO, where the real power lies. I have similarly connected this to the flaming sword, boundary that guards the tree of life in the supernal Eden. Dali was demonstrating in this painting that the cross folds up into a cube. He was also showing us that the sacrifice of Jesus took place on a hyperdimensional level, and not just here. The hypercube, a cube within a cube, the dimensions of the inner cube double in the outer, is, as I discuss in Clock Shavings, the real model of the universe. Cain explained that we are on the inside, and the spirits trapped in Tartarus are in the outer cube. That is their prison. This is represented on the Agio board as the 28 squares in the outer ring. Note that there are 28 phases of the moon each month. The Kabbalistic text, Sefer Yetzirah, talks about there being 28 encampments of the divine presence. Returning to the subject of Corpus Hypercubus, let us note that Mary, shown crying before the crucified Christ, is standing on a chessboard, and on top of the board, directly beneath her feet, is a black polygon shape, acting as a platform to raise her up slightly above the floor. Well, I can't tell what shape it is, because we only see one of the corners. But Brian felt the need to put the little Agio board in the bottom right corner of our Ouija board, on top of a nonagon, and the rose cross on top of a triskaidekagon on the bottom right. In the literature of the Golden Dawn, where this particular cross design comes from, they make a point of mentioning that the cross folds up into a cube. Interestingly, the Rosicrucian lore, promoted by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which designed the rose cross image used on the board, talks about the tomb of their hero, Christian Rosenkreuz, who it describes as being buried in a secret vault, deep in a cave inside of a mountain, which was lit by an inner or artificial sun. Yet in actual Golden Dawn rituals, it is not described as a sun at all, but as a rose. To quote from the ritual, "Although in the tomb the sun does not shine, it is lit by the symbolic rose of our order in the center of the first heptagonal ceiling." So we have this image of a rose acting as a deck prism in the tomb of Christian Rosenkreuz, who, for the purposes of our discussion here, can be thought of as a representation of Christ. Presumably, the light produced by this is a faint red, which would be consistent with its image as a rose. Note 2. As I said, our chessboard/Agio board on the Ouija board is sitting on top of a 9-sided shape, and the cross is standing on top of a 13-sided shape. 9 plus 13 equals 22, the number of letters in the sacred Hebrew alphabet. It's also the number of petals on this Golden Dawn rose cross we're using. This is deliberate on the part of the symbol's designers, Golden Dawn practitioners. They sometimes even draw the letters directly on the petals. Now let's look at that mural that started it all, the reason I used the Ouija board to contact Cocteau in the first place. The crucifixion at Notre-Dame de France. Beneath the feet of the crucified Jesus, which is the only part of him visible, there is a rose, colored blue with red outlines, present on the cross. When I published my book, The Merovingian Mythos, in 2004, I reported on a message I received from an Australian who told me that Jean Marais, one of Cocteau's closest friends, had started a secret group called the Order of the Blue Rose, dangling hints that there would be more information to come. Amazingly, in the last couple of months, the new Twin Peaks series has aired, in which there is a secret group called Blue Rose. The series also deals with the subject of interdimensional realms, artificial realities, and the creation of homunculi. As I write this, I've still only seen the first half of the season, but this is my understanding of where the story is going. Now look at what used to be on the altar right in front of the blue rose on the cross at Notre-Dame de France. This altar, designed by Cocteau, shows you the letter M, the 13th letter of the alphabet, stylized to resemble two mountain peaks, with the blue rose rising like the sun behind him. These two mountains are the pillars that hold up the sky, as I will explain in the future. Jean Cocteau's tribute to the Virgin Mary, Notre-Dame de France, Leicester Place, London. It also occurs to me that the moon appears red on an eclipse and blue at other times. In general, its light appears blue. This causes me to wonder if the blue rose represents the moon. That's why in my novel Genuflect, the moon becomes pregnant with a new sun, and then appears to be filtering a strong source of UV light, which it emits in the form of black light. In that book, I also mention associations between the moon and the buttocks, as well as the genre of anal pornography in which a rectum that has been severely sexually abused to the point of prolapse and external protrusion is called a rosebud. In my story, a girl injected with the spirit of the moon is impregnated in an anal rape ritual. She is impregnated through unnatural means. Then afterwards, she, and reflexively, the moon in the sky, both give birth to supernatural beings via anal delivery. This was described by Aleister Crowley as the best way to breed a Superman or Moonchild homunculus, possessed of the spirit of one of the planetary archons. He claimed that supernatural spirits were more likely to be attracted by a sex ritual and entrapped into the body of a newly conceived child if the sex were somehow unnatural. He thought that anal sex magic was the highest form of magic there is. Where is this all leading us in regards to the video you just watched? Uranus, whose name phonetically sounds like your anus, told us that what's down is up, that the night sky is actually below us, in the abyss. She said that behind the moon is a portal to the below, the ass end of the universe. Those moon stages are, most likely, the opening and closing of that portal. When it's a new moon, it's completely open, which is why the Mithraic cult used to hold their celebrations on the new moon. This, they said, is the best time to try to escape the material realm by conquering the sun and climbing the stairway to heaven, which is what Mithraism is all about. They believed that the moon was responsible for entrapping souls into bodily incarnation, and that the ideal time to escape the earth was when she was out of the picture. In this way, it reminds me of a Native American soul catcher net. Aleister Crowley, in his book Moonchild, used the term butterfly net to describe the supernatural boundary created around the ritual space for a magical sex rite used to call down souls from the stars and planets, divine souls, and ensnare them into bodily incarnation. Interestingly, the word for the bottom part of a cut gemstone, pavilion, comes from a French root word that actually means butterfly net. Now, what does this have to do with the figure of the zodiac man? Uranus, bent backwards with his head over his feet. If he is bent backwards around us, that means we are looking at his backside at all times. Remember when God told Moses that, "No man can see my face and live," so he showed him his back parts instead? Michelangelo demonstrated exactly what this passage implies when he painted a picture of God floating away from Moses with his bare buttocks visible on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. In modern times, several other people, such as David Icke and Peggy Kane, have talked about a net placed around our world that keeps us from seeing anything beyond three-dimensional space. Icke calls it the Saturn-Moon matrix and thinks it's a signal being passed between the planet Saturn and our moon. I do think that this hypothesis is leaning in the right direction, in that I think there is a relationship between these two things, Saturn and the moon. Whatever they are. There is a filter around us, keeping us from seeing rays of light angled in the fourth dimension. Some consider time the fourth dimension, and light travels faster than anything in existence, or so they say. But what if there was another set of directions for it to travel in, perpendicular to left-right, forward-backward, and up-down? Or what if time is nothing more or less than that other direction itself, and light's movement through it? The way that Arthur C. Clarke originally wanted the story of 2001, A Space Odyssey to go, involved a trip to Saturn, not Jupiter. So the signal between the two monoliths on each body was meant to be passed between Saturn and the moon, beckoning humans to seek the answer to the mystery on Saturn instead. Therefore, when the main character Dave Bowman goes to Jupiter and beyond the infinite, he was really meant to be traveling beyond the realm of Saturn time, through Urania to Hyper-Urania, outside the cosmos, beyond the ceiling of the fixed stars, as classic cosmology viewed it. In the film, the character Dave experiences his whole life, into old age, in a few seconds of time. Then his consciousness seems to pass on into a realm of hyperspace occupied by bright-colored, crystalline objects that seem to be alive and intelligent. I have written about this movie before and will do so again in the future. But the last relevant thing I want to point out before moving on is the imagery found on the Universe trump card in Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot deck. A woman is shown surrounded by a net, behind which is a green light, holding a darkly colored crescent in her hand. Behind the net, there is also a giant eye. The crescent appears to be catching a bluish light that is being emitted from the dark outer surrounding ring of the eye's pupil, and the moon is reflecting the light back into that eye. Meanwhile, a golden light is emitted from the black inner circle of the eye's pupil, through the net, and through the body of the serpent that the woman is entwined with as she steps on its head. I believe this is showing us that there is one object that provides the light for both the sun and the moon, the hyper-Uranian sun from beyond the sky. I don't know if this is a light source in itself, or really just a portal to a source of ultimate light from beyond our realm that is being filtered in two different ways to create two different effects: the golden solar light and the silver-blue lunar light. Masonic writer Albert Pike calls the second sun Mercury, saying that it is the Mercury of the philosophers that the alchemists talked about. I find myself wondering if it works somewhat like an old mercury gas lamp, but I shall leave such speculation at that. Clearly, the woman is Eve, for as God told the serpent after the fall in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, "I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." This shows the relationship between mankind and the realm of the fallen Satan in Tartarus. Man fell from paradise to earth, but the serpent fell to a place lower still, and is therefore, in a way, forced to act as a footstool for Eve and her offspring in the earthly realm that they dominate. But she also has the duty of bruising his head, subduing him. Furthermore, she is shown holding the seemingly lunar crescent in her hand, as if she were acting as a base for it. This goes along with the way in which the Sephiroth of existence are ordered on the Kabbalistic tree of life, where Malkuth, the kingdom, the earth realm, Eve's realm after the fall, is shown on the bottom, with Yesod, foundation, considered the lunar realm, stacked on top of it, along with the three pillars upholding all the other Sephiroth. That's a lot of weight to put on one lady's neck. It also goes along with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's diagram of, quote, the Garden of Eden before the fall, which show Eve holding the pillars of the tree of life above her head, one in each hand, like Atlas holding the sky, and Adam standing on her head, seemingly crucified on the tree above her. Now look again at Corpus Hypercubus. The cube has a black square poking Jesus right in the back. He is bent backwards over it. The arch of his body isn't as overt here as it is for the Zodiac Man depictions. But because it's the crucified Jesus, you know that he's bent over in an uncomfortable position. The fact that he's being tortured is obvious. Indeed, that's what it seems is happening to the Zodiac Man too. The position of his body is consistent with that of what's called the arch of hysteria. This is the position that people afflicted with hysteria and brain conditions like meningitis naturally make. The Masonic Royal Arch keystone, which they depict as being at the top of the arch of the sky, is overtly synonymous with the sacrum bone. Literally, in Latin, the sacred bone. The bone is located at the base of your spine. It acts as a keystone holding your buttocks and thighs together. Jewish traditions state that the soul retreats here after death, awaiting the final judgment. This is why, they say, you should never get cremated, because otherwise you can't be resurrected in the New Jerusalem. In that way, the sacrum bone acts as both a prison and a coffin for the soul. But if the soul is rebirthed from there, then it can also be considered an egg. In a previous seance, Mithras told us that Jesus is the sun, or at least that he is part of the mechanism that allows it to operate, and that he is still being crucified today. He claims that this is what happened after the ascension, after the sky opened up to receive the risen Christ. If we were to take this to somehow be the actual truth, then might not his bleeding heart be synonymous with the sun's light rays? After all, the Christian symbol of the Sacred Heart depicts this. Consider also that the sphere of Tifereth, beauty, in the Kabbalistic tree of life, corresponds to both the sun, when classical planetary attributions are applied, and to the heart, when the tree is considered as a diagram of the microcosmic human body. Now let us think about the poem Le Serpent Rouge, written by agents of the mysterious Priory of Sion in France, perhaps even by Jean Cocteau himself, as I suggested in my book, The Merovingian Mythos. In it, there is an allusion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus as a source of love, beaming from one to another. Are the authors telling us that the bleeding heart of Jesus literally is the source of the sun's rays? Then, of course, we have to re-examine the Grail legend, in which the hero Percival, whose name means pierce the veil, must, in order to heal his uncle, find the magical spear that wounded him, associated in legend with the spear of Longinus that pierced the side of Christ. In the story, his uncle, the Fisher King, has a wound in his thigh that will not heal and causes him great pain. This pain is said to be heightened at certain points in the cycles of both the moon and Saturn. The king never leaves his sickbed and survives on some kind of sustenance provided to him by the Grail, usually described as a magical vessel that contains, or once contained, the blood of Christ. But in Wolfram von Eschenbach's version, the Grail is a stone, and the Fisher King is fed by it because a dove from heaven comes down to him once a year on Good Friday with a communion wafer that has touched the stone. It sounds to me like the stone is the body of Christ, which, as I've suggested, may literally be a crystal, providing the natural effects that we experience as the sun. If his blood is the sun's light, which is consistent with the ancient Greek belief that their gods had special blood called ichor, made from light, and other more widespread beliefs that all blood contains light, aka life force, then does that mean the Grail cup is a thing that somehow contains the sun's light? So perhaps this crystal, this keystone, this rock of God or Ibn Ha that's in the sky, as we're told, is the sacrum bone of some higher being who is arched backwards above us, being held in a torture position in this outer realm of chaos. This, I've been told by the spirits, is the realm of Tartarus, where people and gods alike are imprisoned and tormented. Perhaps his anus is the moon, as the symbolism indicates. After all, we can't look at the sun directly, but like Moses can look at God's back parts, we can look at the moon. Then perhaps that is the portal from whence we enter this incarnation from our place of origin. In Mysterium Baphometus Revelatum, Orientalist Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall described what he believed were idols of the Knights Templar depicting Baphomet, upon which were inscribed the words, "Return through the rectum is easy." Return from what? The other side of death, I think. Is that heaven or hell? It's unclear. Think about this. The etymology of Ghent is unknown. But to me, it reminds me of the word Gehenna, a Hebrew word for hell. Then again, there's also the Islamic paradise Jannah, which is sometimes represented as a precious jewel, just like New Jerusalem. Another figure from the tarot whose imagery fits in with this part of our discussion is that of the Fool, which has always been considered a representation of Percival in the Grail story, running off towards his fateful adventure without looking where he's going. In traditional tarot, such as the Rider-Waite deck, the Fool is always shown stepping thoughtlessly off a high cliff into the air with his eyes closed, or staring off stupidly in another direction. Because he is oblivious to the fact that the path before him has no ground, one wonders if he might not just be able to continue walking off into the air like Wile E. Coyote until he looks down, of course. Is this similar to how Christ's miracle of walking on water was achieved? And did he, like the fool Percival, walk blindly down a path that led to him being stuck for an eon in an uncomfortable position, forced to carry the weight off the sky while being perpetually drained of his energy? After all, it turned out that he had been waiting for ages for one of his relatives to discover his castle in the nebulous Grail Kingdom that seems like an alternate dimension. The Fisher King's role was like that of the porter of the castle in The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. The porter is stuck in that position as a punishment, having transgressed against the castle of the Sun King for having stumbled upon the naked body of Lady Venus, who is laying nude in one of the castle's rooms under a spell that keeps her asleep. This is a metaphor usually interpreted as unveiling the secrets of nature, and Sir Francis Bacon used it consciously for that purpose in some of his works. In The Chemical Wedding, the porter tricks Christian Rosenkreuz into committing the same error, which sets the porter free as Christian replaces him. That night, Christian is forced to sleep next to Atlas and the elderly gentleman of the tower, who seems like Uranus. Lady Venus, the sleeping beauty of this tale, is under the same spell as all the immortals in Tartarus, Similarly, Saturn was said by Plutarch to be under a sleeping spell in a chamber of Tartarus directly beneath Britain, where his dreams form the chains that keep him imprisoned there. Like the Fisher King, he is kept alive by birds who bring him ambrosia and feed it to him while he sleeps. And he communicates in his dreams with people who are alive on Earth today while he sleeps below, just like Mithras and Uranus did with us. Considering how this story ended, we must wonder what is implied by the Charles Perrault fairy tale of Briar Rose, where the prince wakes the sleeping princess with a kiss. We think of him as a hero who lived happily ever after with his bride. But perhaps it was all a ruse with a more sinister motive, and he also was put under a spell, like Odysseus on the island of Circe. Returning to the subject of the Fool Trump in the tarot, I would now like to discuss how this figure is depicted in Aleister Crowley's Thoth deck. Instead of walking on a path, he appears to be splayed out, almost on a St. Andrew's cross, X-shape. There is what looks like a hose running out from his heart, then spiraling out around him. The hose appears to be connected to the crystal in his right hand. Traveling along the hose towards the fool's heart is a dove, symbol of the spirit, and a butterfly, symbol of the soul. Meanwhile, traveling in the opposite direction from the heart of the fool is a caduceus, a symbol that in modern times has become associated with DNA, and even anciently was an emblem of healing through bloodletting. What we are looking at is Percival having taken over his uncle's role as the Grail King. Like his uncle, and like Saturn in Tartarus, he now reigns over a hidden kingdom, and yet he is there, visible in the midst of things, and somehow everything depends upon him. He is stuck in a position of suffering, being fed on souls and spirits while being perpetually drained of his precious blood. This has got to be analogous to Jesus as the Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, always shown bleeding into a cup on the altar of God's kingdom, just like on the Ghent altarpiece, where the connection between the Lamb's blood pouring into the cup on the altar and the light of the sun beyond the sun is made explicit. Here, on Crowley's tarot card, the golden sun of Tifereth is shown on the fool's crotch, which implies to me that the moon might be on the backside. Note too that, apart from the beard, there isn't much to identify this figure as a male. With large breasts and curvy hips, this could be Joan of Arc wearing a knight's armor. I am unclear about what the 3 white flowers between the splayed legs signifies, but the 2 tiny people embracing directly beneath them are an image taken from William Blake's Marriage of Heaven and Hell. In the notes that come with the deck, the artist, Frida Harris, describes the tubing as the rainbow issuing from and returning to his heart. She claims that he is unconscious of the tiger tearing at his side. However, his bugged-out plastic eyes staring forward betray a man who has been through trauma of the worst sort, chronically, and is probably simply resigned to the perpetual torment of creatures feeding off him. He has probably also retreated into a trance or hallucination and loathes to be reminded of the truth of his condition, a description that I think probably fits our own experience of reality as well. Older tarot decks often showed the fool with his genitals hanging out, and a cat or dog scratching at them, though he walks onward, careless if not oblivious. Considering that what Percival's uncle, the Fisher King, suffered from was a wound in the thigh or genitals, which needed to be regularly bled to drain out the poison, might it not be possible that the same thing is now happening to him? This would fit with what Mithras told us about Jesus, that he got stuck in perpetual crucifixion after he ascended to the Father, which somehow resulted in him becoming the Son itself. This is apparently a torturous position to be in, an everlasting cosmic victim like Atlas, upon whose suffering existence itself is dependent. The Sun's torturous position in the sky, hanging between heaven and earth, is also seen on that other tarot card that is always said to represent Percival, the Hanged Man. In traditional decks, he hands from a Tau cross, upside down like St. Peter, though he's tied, not nailed. One of his legs is straight, the other folded over it so that it looks like the number 4, or the symbol for the planet Jupiter. These decks also usually show his hands tied behind his back, although in some cases his arms are hanging down with money bags dangling from him. This last detail caused some to say that the card represented Judas, and that the bags of money contained the silver that he sold Jesus for. Other myths describe a figure in this position being punished as a criminal. According to the Book of Enoch, the fallen angel Shemhazi was condemned to hang upside down between heaven and earth as punishment for his role in the plot to impregnate human women with the seed of angels. The solar halo behind his head on the Rider-Waite deck seems to identify him with the sun. The figure in Crowley's Thoth deck adds more detail. Here he is hanging from a blue-green half-circle emitting rays of light which I might otherwise take to be the Hyper-Uranian sun, especially with the crepuscular rays coming out of his head below onto a plane beneath it, underneath which is a subterranean serpent. But according to the deck's instruction book, the blue-green stuff is actually water. It says, "This figure is Osiris or Christ, and shows redemption through suffering. He is drowned in the waters of affliction." The attitude is traditional and involves a right angle and a triangle. Speaking of which, let's get to the lines and angles that were used by Mithras and Uranus during this seance. The same line and angle from top right to bottom left that the spirits kept repeating this time was also emphasized in a previous discussion with Mithras. In both sessions, this and the last, a triangle containing this angle was also drawn on the board multiple times. I believe we were being shown the way in which the eclipse would appear to us, the angle from which the darkness would cover the sun. However, I also think it pertains to what the spirits said about folding the universe. I believe the answer is found in a commonly used Masonic motif. I have already mentioned the pillars of Jachin and Boaz used on Masonic tracing boards and on our Ouija board. But on some Masonic tracing boards there are actually 3 pillars. Between the pillars of strength and mercy, there is the pillar of beauty, corresponding to the middle pillar on the Kabbalistic tree of life. On Masonic tracing boards, this pillar is shown as physically behind the other 2 and more towards stage left than right. In other words, it is implied that this 3rd pillar was invisible before from your previous perspective when you saw the more commonly depicted 2 pillars. Hidden behind the pillar of strength, like the castle of the Princess Briar Rose hidden beneath the bramble in Perrault's tale, is the sleeping beauty of the middle pillar that most do not see, but which provides, in Kabbalistic tradition, the most direct route to the highest form of enlightenment. This hidden path is indicated frequently on Masonic tracing boards by a staircase leading up to a hidden portal of light shown up in the sky, off in the distance. This is indicated by the depiction of a light source shining brighter than the sun and moon that are usually placed above the left and right pillars, respectively. It is shown variously as another, brighter sun, or as the letter G inside of a hexagram, or inside of a square and compass, or some combination of these things. I have even seen it drawn as just an opening in the sky with light shining through it. Leading up to that opening, there is usually a pathway which appears physically impossible. It is either a ladder, like a painter's ladder, leaning up against seemingly nothing, or a staircase or road that appears to twist in a non-Euclidean trajectory. This is because the positions of the 3 pillars form a right triangle when viewed from above. This shape is the subject of Euclid's 47th proposition, which Albert Pike summarized as well as anybody in his Masonic instruction manual, Morals and Dogma. In every right-angled triangle, the sum of the squares of the base and the perpendicular is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is that 3rd longer line connecting the other 2, and its name comes from a Greek word that means stretching under. The 47th proposition, and the image of its geometric calculation, is utilized heavily in Masonic ritual. By that I am referring to the visual demonstration of it, which consists of 3 squares composed of other squares, often, especially on Masonic devices, presented as black and white checkerboards. The smaller of the 3 big squares forming the triangle has 36 squares. That's the square of 6, and the number of squares in the 2nd square of Agio. The middle size of the 3 big squares has 64 squares. That's the square of 8 and the cube of 4. The largest of the 3 big square contains 100 squares. That's the square of 10, and this layout is what you get when you surround the 64 squares of a chessboard with another 36 squares. But what does this have to do with a ladder leading to a portal in the sky, leaning up against empty air, or a paved street spiraling off from the ground into the clouds, with no visible means of support? After all, a right triangle is something drawn on a two-dimensional surface, right? How does that relate to what's being shown in the Masonic tracing boards with 3 pillars? Recall that the positions of the 3 pillars form a right triangle when viewed from above. What the Masons are trying to show their initiates is the idea that, when viewed from another angle beyond the 3rd dimension, the thing supporting the staircase or ladder is visible for those with eyes to see it. But the light bouncing off this thing or group of things is traveling at an angle or on a wavelength that makes it invisible to normal human eyes. This pertains to that angelic language made of angles of light that John Dee channeled the keys to. It might just seem funny to consider that a language made of angles of light might be called Anglish. And the English language, of course, stems from the Angles, Germanic people who settled in Britain, and whose language eventually merged with that of the Saxons. But according to linguist Julius Pokorny, the root of the name comes from an Info-European word meaning to bend, in other words, to form an angle. Quote, "We could also consider the fact that modern English, presently the world's international language of commerce, owes just as much, if not more, to the works of William Shakespeare, and to the King James translation of the Bible, as it to its English roots." Amazingly, John Dee was involved in both endeavors. He also had a great deal to do with the mapping of the globe Earth, including Antarctica and the New World across the Atlantic, perfecting his own techniques for calculating its alleged spherical geometry. He also came up with his own calculations for the movements of the stars, and created one of the first celestial globes, mapping the stars seen from Earth on a sphere. He was personally involved in training some of Britain's earliest explorers of America, providing them maps, instructions, and even equipment that he had invented himself, such as the paradoxical compass. As Stephen Sora writes in The Lost Treasure of the Knights Templar, while not noted for his science of navigation, his work The Perfect Art of Navigation led Sir Francis Drake to believe it was possible to sail around the world. When discussion of the Drake voyage first emerged, backers of the scheme enlisted Dee to help. Through the use of some convoluted logic, Dee convinced Elizabeth that she was a linear descendant of Arthur and was entitled to be the Queen of America, and Scandinavia and Russia for good measure. Elizabeth and other backers put up the funds for Drake's secret mission. The voyage of the Golden Hind yielded a 700% return for the investors. Dr. Dee's collection also included the charts and maps of the Zeno Sinclair expedition. The explorer Sir Martin Frobisher had obtained these from Dee. For the honor of his queen, he wrote tracts promoting the expansion of the quote, 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 a term he is credited with originating. Not only that, he also coined the term Britannia, a word that he actually channeled from one of the angels, communicated to him through the Enochian language of light beams refracted through crystals. Heck, the word angel, which means messenger, is an anagram of angle and sounds almost identical. As it turns out, the Old English word that angle comes from was spelled angel, and the Germanic roots mean fish hook. This is how it came to mean bend, and then the space between two intersecting lines. This is how it developed into the word anchor, and coincidentally, an anchor was the symbol of the secret society that helped to plot the creation of the British Empire in America, to which both Sir Francis Bacon and John Dee belong. More is said on this later in the essay. But what about the word language itself? Well, this purportedly comes from the Latin word for tongue, lingua, but it's an interesting coincidence that in English the word developed to contain ang, which now has a broader meaning to us when viewed from this new esoteric angle. Haha! See what I did there? I am getting ahead of myself. For now, let us return to the 3 pillars on the tracing board forming a right triangle. For this leads us back to the 4th dimension and to the mapping of the New World. It leads there because, according to Masonic rituals and literature, while ostensibly representing Solomon's Temple, this tracing board also represents the world. Specifically, it denotes the Old World, or as Masonic writer Albert Mackey in the Lexicon of Freemasonry writes, the world as it was known in Solomon's time, and further, the entire universe itself. For visual aid, look at the tracing board example below, which was actually designed to be a carpet laid out on the floor of the lodge during a ritual. There is a directional compass around the edge, showing you how to orient it on the floor of a Masonic lodge. The part of the picture containing the sky is pointing towards the east. The observer is standing in the west. Therefore, the pillars that are in front, The ones we more commonly see appearing to stand on either side of each other, supposedly flanking the entrance to Solomon's temple, are synonymous with the North and South Poles. Albert Mackey further explains the connection between the floor of the lodge and geography. The form of a Masonic lodge is said to be a parallelogram or oblong square, its greatest length being from east to west, its breadth from north to south. A square, a circle, a triangle, or any other form but that of an oblong square would be eminently incorrect and un-Masonic, because such a figure would not be an expression of the symbolic idea which is intended to be conveyed. At the Solomonic era, the era of the building of the temple at Jerusalem, the world, it must be remembered, was supposed to have that very oblong form, which has been here symbolized. If, for instance, on a map of the world, we should inscribe an oblong figure whose boundary lines would circumscribe and include just that portion which was known and inhabited in the days of Solomon, these lines running a short distance north and south of the Mediterranean Sea, and extending from Spain in the west to Asia Minor in the east, would form an oblong square, including the southern shore of Europe, the northern shore of Africa, and the western district of Asia, the length of the parallelogram being about 60 degrees from east to west, and its breadth being about 20 degrees from north to south. This oblong square, thus enclosing the whole of what was then supposed to be the habitable globe, would precisely represent what is symbolically said to be the form of the lodge, while the pillars of Hercules in the west, on each side of the Straits of Gades or Gibraltar, might appropriately be referred to the two pillars that stood at the porch of the temple. A Masonic lodge is, therefore, a symbol of the world. This symbol is sometimes, by a very unusual figure of speech, extended in its application, and the world and the universe are made synonymous, when the lodge becomes, of course, a symbol of the universe. But in this case, the definition of the symbol is extended, and to the ideas of length and breadth are added those of height and depth, and the lodge is said to assume the form of a double cube. The solid contents of the earth below and the expanse of the heavens above will then give the outlines of the cube, and the whole created universe be included within the symbolic limits of a Mason's lodge. The form of a lodge should always be an oblong square, in length, between the east and west, in breadth, between the north and the south, in height, from earth to heaven, and in depth, from the surface to the center. This disposition serves to indicate the prevalence of Freemasonry over the whole face of the globe, guarded by its laws and ornamented by its beautiful tenets. Every civilized region is illuminated by its presence. Its charity relieves the wretched. Its brotherly love unites the fraternity in a chain of indissoluble affection, and extends its example beyond the limits of the lodge room to embrace, in its ample scope, the whole human race, enfolding them in its arms of universal love. The square form was esteemed by our ancient operative brethren as one of the greater lights and a component part of the furniture of the lodge. The double cube is an expressive emblem of the united powers of darkness and light in the creation. Amazingly, the United States $1 bill also conforms to the same dimensions of the oblong square, see below. On a globe model of the Earth, the North and South Poles are an equal distance apart. But on the flat Earth disk model, the North Pole is in the center, closer to where most of us live, while the alleged South Pole is actually a ring all around us, the outer edge of which, Antarctica, an ice wall, they say, is further away from us and inaccessible to most. Beyond the ice and the firmament dome that allegedly sits on top of it is the chaos of the abyss, both above us and below us, just as the spirits on the Ouija board indicated to us. In Aleister Crowley's Book 4, on a page directly opposite a reproduction of John Dee's Sigil of Ameth, aka Sigil of Truth or Sigil of God, there are a few lines reminiscent of Albert Mackey's description of a Masonic lodge, as quoted above. What is the length of this temple? From north to south. What is the breadth of this temple? From east to west. What is the height of this temple? From abyss to abyss. There is, therefore, nothing movable or immovable under the whole firmament of heaven, which is not included in this John Dee's pentacle. This resembles a quotation from Psalm chapter 72, verse 8. Ye shall have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. This line is written in Hebrew on the outer circle around the second pentacle of Saturn, as presented in the Key of Solomon. This pentacle includes the Satyrotus magic square that has a Mithraic origin, and which I used as a plot device in my novel Genuflect. But in the edition edited by S.L. McGregor Mathers, he quotes the end of the line as, "From the flood unto the world's end." That makes it sound like it's an epic of time. But I also take the flood to be the abyss, and the world's end to be the literal extremities of the world/universe. Uranus told us in the seance that time only exists within the enclosure of our world, so that makes the end of time and the world's end the same thing. Thus, to exit the world is to step or slide out of time, just like the Mason's step. A maneuver done in ritual when the heel of one foot is slid across the floor and up against the heel of the other foot at a 90-degree angle. Returning to the subject of the universe depicted on our uniquely designed Ouija board, the floor of existence is shown as just the waters of the abyss. It was indicated by Mithras and Uranus that these are the same waters you end up in when attempting to exit the firmament above. This means going in a loop, going underneath the universe, as was implied in our seance when the planchette was moved underneath the board briefly and deliberately. In Book 4, Aleister Crowley instructs student magicians to place a reconstruction of John Dee's Sigil of Emeth atop an altar made in the, quote, form of a double cube. But as I explained in my book, Clock Shavings, he's just copping out by suggesting they make an altar formed by placing one cube on top of another. That's not the real double cube of mystic import. As Crowley himself wrote in that same book, in the study of geometry, doubling the cube, making a cube exactly twice the size of another cube, was long considered one of those unsolvable problems, and it still cannot be done with a square and compass. Plutarch wrote that this problem came to the attention of the Greeks when the oracle at Delphi told the people of Delos that they would not receive answers to their prayers until they doubled the size of their altar to the god Apollo, which was a cube. In other words, they were being told to double the size of their cubic altar to the sun. The real way to double the cube, of course, is to build a hypercube. That's how you surround a cube with another cube, surrounding the second square, as the winner must do in Agio. I've already pointed out that the Christian cross is the hypercube, so the altar that Christ died on is double the cube of Apollo's altar. As I've said in my previous writings, Jesus was the new son, the new king of the gods, inheriting the title of Zeus, which Greek and Roman writers thought might belong to either Apollo or Dionysus, two candidates for his firstborn son and heir, should he ever be dethroned. However, it seems this role was taken up by Christ instead. According to Wikipedia, the last of the Delphic oracles was in 393 AD when, by order of Emperor Theodosius I, the temple was closed and never reopened. The oracle declared, "All is ended." Within 5 years the emperor was dead, and 15 years later, Alaric the Visigoths captured. The era of the new sun had already begun. Time had already started over, at least in a sense. However, this would not begin until 525, when the Anno Domini, in the year of the Lord, chronology system was invented by Dionysius Exiguus of Scythia Minor. But that's if you believe the standard chronology taught in schools. Russian mathematician Anatoly Fomenko and his team of scientists have written over 7 volumes of a book series called History, Fiction or Science, in which they call into question all mainstream chronology. They argued, quite compellingly, that the Dark Ages was a total invention, and that all ancient history is just repetition of the same stories we find about medieval times, with the names and certain other details changed slightly. I know it's hard to believe, but once you see his evidence, which includes several years of missing lunar eclipses in the standard chronology, and depictions of star locations in former times that don't match up with where they should be, you will realize that Fomenko is onto something. He says history can be condensed down to 2,000 verifiable years. All of the ancient myths that the story of Christ is commonly thought to be plagiarized from are, according to Fomenko, actually the fictional versions. As for the Bible, he believes that the revelation of St. John the Divine is actually the oldest of the books in it. Everything else, he thinks, was written afterwards, which is why all of the prophecies in these books seem to match up with what St. John presents. Considering this, it is interesting to note that the image used on the cover of Fomenko's book is of Jesus crucified on a clock tower. A similar image is used for the poster for the film Dark City from 1999, with the main character shown up against a clock in the same position. In Dark City, people are living on some kind of flat platform, covered with a dome that is turned away from the sun so that it's always nighttime. But they are oblivious to this, as every night at midnight they fall asleep and their world changes. They wake up with a different life, and no memory of things having ever been the way they were before. This is because underneath the platform is a machine that controls the enclosed world they are in, operated by the mind power of the creatures that live under there. They are humanoid, with pasty white, sallow skin, very tall, with sharp teeth and claws, in other words, like devils or vampires. They use their minds to operate the machine that changes reality for the people on the surface, and that keeps the people from remembering what reality is. To add a further layer of horror, the strangers explain that the humans trapped in the city are actually reanimated corpses, with no memory of the personality that originally inhabited their bodies. This could all be a metaphor for our current situation, since our sun is perhaps not real, nor are we being exposed to much in the way of real, hyper-Uranian light, though we seem to not know any better. Or it could be a metaphor for a reality that has existed before, such as Cain's netherworld city of Enoch in Nod, where, I've been told by spirits, only a black sun exists. This is especially fascinating because the director of Dark City, Alex Proyas, has recently written on Facebook referring to the world as This Flat Earth. His film, Gods of Egypt, depicts a flat Earth cosmology, which is historically appropriate. However, it seems to me that he chose to emphasize this on social media to point out his personal belief system, which I think Dark City exposes quite clearly. Another film to consider in this context is Back to the Future, when Doc Brown becomes strapped by a cable in front of a clock on top of a building, and at one point is actually shown hanging from it. This is where he connects the two wires that make it possible for Marty to drive back to 1985 from 1955. In other words, that's where the time portal is. I think that all three of these images of men crucified or hanging from clocks indicate that the crucifixion really was the beginning of a new time, not just a new timeline, but a new eon in the Gnostic sense. It is a separate universe with its own time and space, in relation to which other eons seem, from our perspective, to be lost in the mists of forgotten time, or in unimaginable spaces like heaven and hell. The universal myth of the flood is an ancestral memory of the waters of chaos that surround each eyes and cut it off from the others. Long before I seriously considered the flat earth theory, or the idea of our universe being in a domed enclosure, I wondered if one might find, when traveling to some place even as relatively close as Mars, that it's really in an entirely different dimension, and that alien cities exist there that simply are not visible to us from here. Now I find myself wondering if the planetary orbits identified classically as higher heavens might not actually be the remnants of past universes, past Earths, past suns, or past eons. Their seeming distance from us in space might be commensurate with their distance from us in time, but it wouldn't be our present kind of time or space, really. So then, is it possible to imagine that when the New World was discovered by Europeans, they were also discovering a different dimension of reality, or maybe even creating it with their observation of it, the alleged observer-created reality factor of alleged quantum physics? Or, an even more mind-blowing possibility, could someone like John Dee and his friends have created it intentionally, through ceremonial magic? Supposedly, as Stephen Sora reports in The Lost Treasure of the Knights Templar, Queen Elizabeth and her ladies-in-waiting traveled to the estate of Dee in Mortlake, where he kept his magic mirror that could see the future. Or were they, as I now suggest, and merely suggest, actually creating the future? Perhaps the reason why a Masonic lodge is made to resemble the world as it looked to people in Solomon's time is because there really was an eon, or what is now to us a lower dimension, in which that is all that existed. Therefore, when people did venture beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the pillars that replaced Atlas, across the Atlantic Ocean, where, according to Plato, the previous eon of Atlantis sunk into the abyss, and built a new country in the New World, they really were creating a new Atlantis. This was the metaphor that Sir Francis Bacon, a contemporary of John Dee, used for the future he saw for America. He wrote about it in an appendix to his work Silva Silvara in 1627. The image he used for this was that of the two pillars of Hercules and a ship sailing through them, going into the plus ultra realm, Latin for more beyond. As I pointed out in my books Solomon's Treasure 2005, Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge 2010, and Clock Shavings 2014, this same image was used on coins minted by the Spanish Habsburgs that circulated in the Americas. It was meant to symbolize their new domain, beyond the pillars. These became some of the first silver dollars used in America, and the two pillars, encoiled with banners that say plus and ultra, respectively, are thought be some to be the origin of the original double-barred dollar sign. However, I argue in my books that there was at least a dual influence, including the image of the serpent on the Tree of Life, found on German silver thalers, minted in Bohemia the 1600s. This image is explicitly connected, by other engravings on the Bohemian coin, to the crucifixion of Christ, and to the scene in Exodus when Moses cures the ills of his people with a magical brazen serpent mounted on a stick. The man who minted these coins, Georgius Agricola, wrote the first comprehensive book on mining and metallurgy, in which he likened minting coins to alchemy. Agricola used a picture of a caduceus, another connected sacred image, as his personal bookplate. The crucified serpent, an explicitly alchemical emblem, is another version of the same imagery. I think this all says something quite specific about the New World of the Americas, and in particular, the United States. Bacon envisioned a utopian society being created there, ruled by an invisible college that was instituted for the interpreting of nature and the producing of great and marvelous works for the benefit of men, under the name of Solomon's House. In other words, it was a wise council of elders using the powers of government to steer society towards science, learning, and the mastery of nature. In Bacon's story, this all took place on a mythical island near the Americas called Ben Salam. Ben means son in Hebrew, and Salem is commonly translated as peace. However, it is also a term used in the Torah to refer to a stepped ziggurat, a ladder or stairway, such as the one that Jacob saw transporting angels between heaven and earth during his vision on the sacred pillow stone. Interestingly, the totality path of the recent solar eclipse in the USA passed through or near several towns named Salem. Bacon is considered one of the inspirational guiding lights for the British colonization of America. Masonic writer Manly P. Hall goes a step further in describing him in The Secret Destiny of America as the head of a secret society that made sure the American colonists were thoroughly indoctrinated with the principles of religious tolerance, political democracy, and social equality. Moreover, according to Hall, the discovery of America by Columbus was actually a strategically staged rediscovery of Atlantis. Sourcing Christopher Columbus was a Greek by Spiros Kateras, 1937. Hall claims that his real name was Prince Nikolaos Ypsilantis, which, I can't help but notice, sounds almost identical to Atlantis. Without pointing that out himself, Hall alleges that what Columbus was actually looking for across the ocean was a remnant of that long-lost island civilization, inspired by Plato's account of it, and therefore he, quote, entered into a conspiracy with men who possessed secret maps of America to conceal the truth about the purpose of his mission abroad. These maps had been both made and collected by the Knights Templar, who, it is implied, this secret society was heir to, as well as by others such as John Dee. In The Secret Destiny of America, Hall produced a map made to represent, as he tells it, Plutarch's description of ancient voyages for the guidance of navigators 13 centuries before Columbus. Hall's claims that there can be no doubt that the existence of a great continent in the Western Hemisphere was known to the ancient Greeks, and calculations based on Plutarch seem to indicate that the Greeks not only reached the coast of America, but explored the St. Lawrence River and part of the Great Lakes area. Hall's map puts colonies of Hercules all over Canada, labels the Florida Peninsula as the Isle of Saturn, and dubs both Cuba and Dominica together as Ogygia of Homer. The last item listed above is the name of the island where Calypso detained Odysseus in Homer's Odyssey, and she was the daughter of Atlas the Titan. As Wikipedia states, Ogygia or Phaeacia have been associated with the putative sunken Atlantis. The same article also states, Hamilton indicated the similarities of Plutarch's account on the Great Continent and Plato's location of Atlantis in Timaeus 24e 25a. Kepler, in his Kepleri Astronomiae Opera Omnia, estimated that the Great Continent was America and attempted to locate Ogygia and the surrounding islands. The word Ogygien actually means primeval, or at the earliest dawn, and also gigantic. The figure its names after Ogyges, who some think might be the same as Okeanos, the great primeval ocean. This makes him equivalent to Tiamat in the Sumerian myth, the dragon who was the ocean of primordial chaos before existence. The hero Marduk cut her in half in order to create existence, which included An, heaven, stretched as a canopy over Kai, earth. Identically, in Greek myth, Uranos, or heaven, and Gaia, or earth, were cleaved apart to allow existence in the Greek myth. Thus, it is easy to see a connection between Ogyges, Okeanos, and Uranos. It all makes sense. Okeanos was cut in twain and separated, leaving Uranos without his partner Gaia, the Sumeria key, represented by the lost letter K, or G. Yet Ogyges is also said to be the founder of Eleusis in Attica, Greece, and the first king of Attica. Sextus Julius Africanus wrote that Ogyges lived at the time of the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, when Moses, whose name means of the water, separated the waters of the Red Sea. Is all of this related to the game of Ageio, which Cain told us in a seance is meant to represent a magical war he had with his rival brother that led to the flood which destroyed Atlantis, which was Eden, according to him, as well as Nod, where he and his progeny had kingdoms. In the apocryphal book of the Cave of Treasures, these events from the early chapters of the book of Genesis are retold, with everything taking place upon the holy Mount Cardo, a term I used in one of my questions in this Mithras and Uranus seance. The Book of the Cave of Treasures describes Eden as a cave at the top of a mountain located in the center of the earth. When they fell from the garden, Adam and Eve were kicked out to the surface of the mountain, but they still had a cave of treasures where they kept their family necropolis. The descendants of Cain, who lived on a lower part of the mountain, Cain having been cast down to Nod, successfully enticed the descendants of Seth, the good brother, down the mountain to mate with their women. This necessitated the flood to wipe out their monstrous, destructive hybrid progeny. In Genesis, this same event is portrayed happening between human females and beings called sons of God that seem to be angels. In another apocryphal text, the Book of Enoch, it is explained that this situation caused not only the flood, but also the fall of those angels, enticed from their lofty perches above by the beauty of the human women, first down to the earth plane, and then down below that into hell. What is being described is the archetypal polar mountain in the center of the earth, found in numerous mythologies from various cultures around the world. It is usually said to be the world's source of magnetism, to which all compass needles are attracted. The name Mount Cardo is undoubtedly related to the Latin cardo. According to etymology.com, this means hinge and originally referred to that of a door. Additional, expanded definitions given there include a pole around which something turns, and that on which something turns or depends. Pole of the sky. The North Pole of the sky, where the Polaris star is centered, is also associated with the opening and closing of the solar year, as was symbolized to the Romans by the two-faced head of Janus, guardian of portals. Polaris is Stella Maris, associated with the Virgin Mary, the patroness of navigators. She was represented by the fleur-de-lis, a national patriotic symbol of regality for the French, whose national personification in homage to her was named Marianne. Because of her associations with the North, the Pole Star, and navigation, the fleur-de-lis came to be used to represent the true North on a compass rose. Stella Maris acts as a lighthouse that can be seen all over the world. Have you ever stopped to think that this might actually be what it is? Literally. At least since the 1960s, American politicians have utilized a parable from Christ, as quoted Matthew chapter 5, verse 14, to describe the United States. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on an hill cannot be hid. This is supposedly meant to represent the USA's perceived role in world leadership, so-called American exceptionalism. One might say that from the sunken wasteland of Atlantis, Bacon's New Atlantis, in the form of the United States, rose up into something that could be seen all over the world, a lighthouse shining across the Atlantic. On a flat Earth, such a thing becomes literally possible. In fact, ancient myths talk about the tallest mountain in the world being located in its exact center, thought to be synonymous with the North Pole. Many modern flat earthers believe there literally is something there that the powers that be are hiding from us. The three-pillar Masonic tracing board shows us that if you go beyond the North Pole, there's another pole. And if you go beyond that, there's a stairway leading to a portal that goes to another dimension, where the light that's coming from both the sun, the moon, and bright object, always shown shining between them, actually originates. On the Royal Arch trading boards, they sometimes represent this concept by showing a keystone in an archway that has been removed, allowing this brighter sun to shine through. As I mentioned, Albert Pike says the light in the middle is Mercury. By this, I assume he's talking about the philosophic mercury used in alchemy, which the alchemists always said was not common mercury or quicksilver, but our mercury, like the CIA or MI6, might refer to one of their agents as our man in Tangiers, etc. One gets the impression that it might actually be the metal mercury, but just in another state. While we normally encounter mercury as a liquid, this, I think, is referring to mercury as a vapor, since alchemical treatises frequently talk about the need to imprison mercury to keep him from escaping. So are the Masonic tracing boards telling us that there is essentially mercury gas behind the veil of the sky, providing the light of both the sun and the moon, the way old-fashioned mercury lamps work? Is this what we would find in the place called by Greek philosophers Hyper-Urania, beyond the sky, or Hyperborea, beyond the north? If so, is there anywhere to go beyond that keystone that, metaphorically or otherwise, plugs up the sky according to Masonic symbolism? Would there be any advantage to anyone to have it removed, as some of the Masonic images show? Interestingly, Masonic imagery also implies a time factor in regards to the pathway/S to higher realms. One picture that I've seen variations on involves a wheel of the solar year and zodiac, in which there is a ladder leading from the sign of Capricorn, the goatfish, at the winter solstice, to the sign of Aries, the ram, at the vernal equinox, ending ultimately at the Pleiades, right before the sign of the bull. In other words, it leads from the time in which we celebrate the birth of Jesus to the time in which we observe his death. This is fitting. Jesus referred to himself as the way to the Father. At the top of the ladder on the tracing boards, we often see an image of the Virgin with her baby, presumably representing the Stella Maris, the pole star. The place and time that the ladder leads to on the wheel just so happens to be the time period in which I chose to stage the events in my novel Genuflect, from the equinox to Easter on April Fool's Day 2018. They culminated in a Neo-Mithraic alchemical ritual that begins with the sacrifice of a bull, conducted with the purpose of opening the hole in the sky to escape the cosmos. But what's quite strange to me is that, according to the Masonic newsletter article one found this image in, entitled Royal Arch Zodiac, the positions of the constellations relative to the solar year phases, as depicted in the image, is no longer accurate due to the alleged precession of the equinoxes. As the article states, these stars do not now mark these points, for the sun has been found to have crossed the equator in a different place each year. As completes the annual circuit of the zodiac, it crosses the equator at a point a small distance back of the place on the ecliptic where it did so the previous year, in consequence of which the equinoctial point is annually falling back at a uniform rate. If placing the equinoctial points and compare the two great circles of the celestial equator and the ecliptic to two great intersecting hoops, and imagine the hoop representing the ecliptic being slowly turned around its center toward Cancer, within the circle of the celestial equator, which remains fixed, the contact between the two hoops being maintained and no change in the angle at which they intersect each other, we shall gain a clear idea of the effect produced by this phenomenon. The point Aries would then slowly advance above the equator until the point Pisces was at the intersection of the two circles. The fishes would then be on the equinox, which is now the case, since approximately during the birth of Jesus Christ, hence ichthus. In time, this motion being continued, the water-bearer will occupy that place, and so on. The point where the sun crossed the equator was once in the constellation of Aries, but the long progress of the centuries, the place of the sun's crossing has fallen back 30 degrees from the 1 degree of that constellation, so that the vernal equinox is now really in the constellation Pisces, the fishes. Or, in other words, the sun enters the stars of the constellation Pisces on March 21st, and not those of the constellation Aries, as it did 22 centuries ago, as we are informed by the ancient. The place, however, where the sun crosses the celestial equator has continued to be, and still is and will continue to be, marked by the sign of Aries, so that the sign of Aries now marks the place in the zodiac of the constellation of the fishes. The signs and the constellations are therefore no longer in the same places. Hence, in order to make our figure of the zodiac strictly correct, the sign Aries should be placed against the constellation Pisces, the sign Pisces against the constellation Gemini, the sign Gemini against the constellation Cancer, and so around the entire circle. This precession of the equinoxes is still going on, but the four cardinal points of the zodiac will always continue to be marked by the signs Aries and Cancer, and Libra and Capricorn, without regard to the constellations which the sun actually enters at those periods. It is by this means that astronomers are able to register upon the face of the heavens this apparent moment of the stars. So it seems that whatever name we are calling a certain zodiac house, it has nothing to do with the zodiac constellation that actually occupies that particular part of the sky anymore. But that's if you believe in the precession of the equinoxes, which some do not. In his book, Earth, Not a Globe, 1865, Samuel Rowbotham wrote of this subject that the Earth a globe, and it is necessarily demanded that it has diurnal, annual, and various other motions. For a globular world without motion of rotation and progression would be useless. Day and night, winter and summer, the half-year's light and darkness at the pole, and other phenomena could not be explained by the supposition of rotundity without the assumption also of rapid and constant motion. Hence, it is assumed that the Earth and Moon and all the planets and their satellites move in relation to each other and also in different planes round the Sun. The Sun and its system of revolving bodies are now assumed to have a general and all-inclusive motion in common with an endless series of other suns and systems round a point which has been assumed to be a central sun, the true axis and center of the universe. These assumed general motions, with the particular and peculiar motions which are assigned to the various bodies in detail, together constitute a system so confused and complicated that it is almost impossible, and always difficult to comprehend by the most active and devoted minds. The most simple and direct experiments, however, prove that the Earth has no progressive or circular motion whatever. And here, again, the advocates of this interminable and entangling arrangement of the universe are challenged to produce a single instance of so-called proof of these motions which does not involve an assumption, often a glaring falsehood, but always a point which is not and cannot be demonstrated. The magnitudes, distances, velocities, and periodic times which these assumed motions eliminate are all glaringly fictitious, because they are only such as a false theory requires and creates a necessity for. It is geometrically demonstrable that all the visible luminaries in the firmament are within a distance of a few thousand miles from the Earth, not more than the space which stretches between the North Pole and the Cape of Good Hope, and the principle of measurement, that of plane triangulation with, invariably, an accurately measured baseline, which demonstrates this important fact, is one which no mathematician claiming to be a master in the science will for a moment deny. All these luminaries, then, and the Sun itself, being so near to us, cannot be other than very small, as compared with the Earth we inhabit. They are all in motion over the Earth, which is alone immovable. What it seems to be is that the Masons, and modern astrologers in general, want to admit that these places, as the article calls them, these zodiac house, are fixed in space, while at the same time claiming that the constellations themselves are moving. What then is the meaning of the images ascribed to the houses? Why not just say that the houses are moving? Is it because then all of the symbolic meaning ascribed to certain things happening at certain times, under the influence of certain stars, would be impossible to assert? By this, I mean not only the predictions of natal charts and weekly horoscopes in the newspapers, but also things such as, for example, the assertion of Macrobius regarding the celestial gates, mentioned by Albert Pike in Morals and Dogma. He claimed that the Tropic of Cancer is the gate of man because souls ascended by it to the earth, while the Tropic of Capricorn was the gate of the gods, because by it they soul reascended to their seats of immortality and became gods. This connects to the fact that the ladder to the Pleiades in the Masonic diagram begins in Capricorn.